Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. As promised, today we're going to be talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I know there's still a lot of people out there that think you can't get that unless you're in the military, uh, in a war zone, but that's not really true. And what is PTSD? PTSD is an event that you have no control over, that you are in a violent event. Uh, Whether you're on a battlefield or if your life has been threatened, uh, uh, let's see, a car accident, fatal car accident, sexual assault, rape, anything like that can cause PTSD. And one thing about PTSD is the way most people uh, develop it is when they're involved in a situation, one of those dramatic situations, uh, or they witness it, and they're talking to the police about it, filling out reports and stuff like that, and they have to go over it, and over it again. The thing is, your brain is kind of an amazing thing, because the more you repeat something, uh, it's kind of like doing a video recording in your head, in your brain, and that'll stick. And what happens is, you start having trouble sleeping, you have nightmares, you have intrusive dreams, during the day you have intrusive thoughts, and it keeps coming back to you, and you keep reliving the event, okay, like it's still going on. And some people are, I don't want to say strong, but some people have such a positive outlook that a lot of times they can get it by without developing PTSD. Uh, that's not saying that you have to have a weak mind to develop PTSD, because there are a lot of people out there with PTSD. Uh, a lot of people don't know they have it. They think, oh, I'm just having nightmares and, la-di-da-di-da. But what happens is that just keeps replaying in your brain. You keep seeing yourself going through it. Or if you witnessed it, you keep seeing it, constantly keep seeing it happen and happen and happen. Now, in some cases, this is not going to hurt anything. But when it becomes a prolonged thing, and you've been doing it for a couple of months or even a year or so, and it starts interfering with your daily life, that's when it's starting to become a problem. It causes a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, uh, and people just have trouble dealing with it. Viewpoint, I'm sorry. From my viewpoint, uh, I see a lot of PTSD. I have a lot of family members that have PTSD. My wife has PTSD, although hers is military related. Uh, PTSD is hard on families, as well as it's extremely hard on the person that has it. Uh, it causes you trouble sleeping. Sometimes you're sleeping too much. Sometimes you're not sleeping enough. Uh, it can give you trouble as far as like eating, things like that. Uh, One of the biggest things I've seen with PTSD, and especially in my wife, because these were uncontrollable situations that happened, one of the symptoms I see to it, and it's not mentioned very often, but one of the symptoms I see to it, and I see it in all my family members who has it, including my wife, uh, I see it in friends who have it, and all that is a control issue, a serious control issue. They have to control everything around them, and they have to control everybody around them, or try to control. Okay? Uh, this is a symptom that's not talked about too often. Uh, a lot of times with PTSD, there's going to be flashbacks. Uh, People are going to feel sad. They're going to kind of have mood swings. Okay, sometimes they're going to feel sad. Sometimes they're going to feel guilty. Uh, it's just a horrible thing to have. So as I say, a lot of people don't believe that non-military personnel, people, individuals, can get PTSD, and that's not true. I mean, there are probably about, I don't know, about almost 5% of adults in the United States get it, and it comes from a variety of things. It comes from mass shootings, you know, school shootings, theater shootings, somebody shooting at you, somebody shooting at one of your family members, somebody shoots you and you live through it. Uh, you know, these type things can cause PTSD. As a truck driver, I drove a truck for about 17 and a half years. I've seen a lot of death out there on the highway. I've seen vans turn over and bodies and people flying out of them, and the van rolling over them, people hitting the pavement and dying. One incident, I hit my brakes and tried to get stopped before I ran over one of those people. Unfortunately, when I got stopped and I was able to jump out of my truck and run around and check on the guy, he was already dead. The majority of the people in that van died. I think there was 7 or 8 people in that van, and one of them survived. And that was on a 4th of July, an upcoming 4th of July weekend. That could have caused me PTSD. You know, I did have dreams about it for a while and stuff like that, but then they started to lessen and lessen. Sometimes that happens when you go through a traumatic event like that. Sometimes it will play over in your mind and pop up in your dreams and stuff like that, but it gets less and less as time goes on. But some individuals, it gets stronger and stronger, becomes more reoccurrent as time goes on. I was on my way to Las Vegas, Nevada one day in my truck, and traffic was pretty much at a standstill. I knew that had to be probably an accident. What I didn't expect was the kind of accident it was. It was a Jeep that had rolled. 3 people in the Jeep were ejected and killed, and one person that still had their seatbelt on was not ejected, but the van evidently rode on them, and when the Jeep landed upright, the person was in the passenger seat and they were hanging out of the Jeep. And of course they were deceased. And when I passed this accident, it was like about 9 o'clock in the morning. And I got to the place I was going to deliver in Las Vegas, and I was watching the 11 o'clock news, because there's 11 o'clock news, and they had just cleared the bodies from the scene. That's how long those bodies laid out there. Again, that could have caused PTSD. I'm sure it did in a lot of people that witnessed it and that had drove by and seen it. I don't know why people were so interested in stopping and looking at the bodies, when a lot of them is going to cause traumatic events too. Okay? So, that being said, PTSD is a severe disorder that you develop in these type of situations, these type of events. And they do cause a lot of problems. The thing is, One thing is that there's something that, with a lot of people, there's something that's going to trigger that event, uh, such as they're going to see on the news. Uh, if a person was raped and they're developing PTSD from that, uh, if they happen to be watching the news and they see on there that another person or two had been raped and all that, that's a trigger. So that's going to trigger their memory of what they went through, and they're going to start seeing it again. And these are called flashbacks, okay? They'll start seeing it again and seeing it again, and that's going to mess with them. It's going to mess with them. So, and same thing with a murder. If somebody in your family was murdered and you've seen it, or one of your friends was murdered and you've seen it, then there's a good possibility that there's a good possibility that you may develop PTSD. I mean, it makes you a prime candidate for it. Now, how you handle the situation is how you handle the situation is what really is going to either lessen the effect or increase the effect. Okay. With me, I've got to the point that as a truck driver, seeing so much death, a lot of friends died, a lot of family members died. Shoot, my sisters that are younger than me have already died. I don't want to say I'm cold-hearted, but I think I've developed a tolerance for death now. I mean, it's still hard. I lost a 6-month-old daughter to crib death, sudden infant death syndrome. And death is still hard. I just lost a grandson because he took his own life. Death is hard. It's hard to cope with. For some women, rape is so very hard for them to cope with. And when they do file a complaint, they have to go to court, they feel like they're being made a victim again because they have to relive the entire event all over again. You know, depending on how long the court trial goes, depending on if they're there every day, they're going to relive this and hear it and hear it and hear it. And this is imprinting in their brain. So that's what I was talking about, like making a videotape in the brain. Okay? If you have the proper coping skills, when you first go through something like this, it can help. Okay? And it may even be one of those situations where the coping skills help lessen the traumatic event. You know, each time it comes up, and each time it comes up to where you can talk about it and feel comfortable talking about it, and knowing that it's not going to cause you any more problems. And that's why I say, you know, I'm not a therapist. I do have my degrees in psychology. I just haven't went and became a licensed therapist. So that's why I always say, when it comes to these videos, talk to somebody. Seek out a therapist, seek out a psychiatrist, a counselor. It doesn't matter who. Just talk to somebody. Find somebody you trust and talk to them. Okay? This is going to help. All right? This is going to help a lot. Later on, and maybe a few other videos, we'll get into some different type things that can be done to help cope with this situation. Because, like I say, any untreated situation, there may be a possibility you can do it without medication, and then again, you may have to take some medication. All right. Don't be ashamed because you have to do it. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody about it. Talking to therapists and psychiatrists does not have the stigma it used to have before. And I've said that in my other videos. My Walking with Bernie video, I made that comment. Uh, the other thing that you need to know is if you have children, be aware that the same thing can happen to them. Okay? Any type of event like that. A woman can develop PTSD from being in an abusive relationship. Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, it doesn't matter. If it's abusive and it gets violent, even the yelling and screaming can be so severe. But when the guy gets violent against a woman, or vice versa, I've seen situations where women just beat the snot out of guys, and the guys don't want to hit them back, so they take it and take it and take it. So this can cause PTSD in them as well. Children are different, okay? Depending on their age, some children may not develop it, but others may. It may show up hours after the traumatic event, months, or even just a couple of years, It really depends on the situation. A lot of people who live in a domestic situation where there's a lot of arguing, fussing and fighting going on, doesn't even have to be violent, and doesn't have to be directed toward the children, but still it affects the children, okay? Now if it's a violent abusive situation where there's a lot of hitting going on and stuff, not necessarily to the children, could be to a spouse, it can still cause PTSD in a child. A lot of people call it childhood PTSD. All right? This creates a lot of problems for a child, especially when they start getting older. Kids under 6, under 6, if they can get upset if their parents aren't close to them. They have trouble sleeping, they act out. They act out through playtime when they're playing with their friends or when they're just playing. If it's a girl, when they're playing with dolls, they can start to act out. Excuse me. Older children can act out too. They can act out while they're playing, while they're sitting around drawing pictures. They can act out, draw violent pictures and stuff like that. So this is a very concerning disorder. Okay, it doesn't mean you're sick, doesn't mean you're a psycho or anything like that. It's just a problem that does come up. And I know my video is kind of long already, so I'll go ahead and get ready to shut this one down. And then I'll do another one to continue this segment of it, and then get into some things that can help, that you can try to do to help yourself, okay? As I say, I live in a household where there's a lot of PTSD. I have to learn coping skills to be able to deal with what's being thrown at me. I have to learn coping skills to be able to help cope with what other family members that have PTSD are doing or going through and stuff like that. So I'm not just coming off the wall here. Like I say, I do have my degrees, but in this particular situation, I live with it on a daily basis as well. So we'll get more into that stuff and more into that type thing in my next video, because the startup of the PTSD is one of the most important factors that you need to know about. And then we can go into some of the things that you could do to try to help cope with it, and learn different coping skills. And still, like I say, if you suspect that you have it or a family member has it, try to get in touch with a professional. Okay, they're going to be able to more. They're going to more be able to help you than what these videos are. These videos are just to give you the basics so that you can start to understand about what's going on and stuff like that, and to help give you some ideas of how to deal with the situations. But still, if you suspect that you or a family member or even any friends have it, if it's not you, try to talk them into seeking some help, some professional help. Because with some professional help, they can learn to live with it and survive it. Because PTSD is so serious that, I mean, it can lead to suicide and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to get off here for today, and I'll work on editing this video so I can get it up Friday. And then next week I'll put on another video going a little bit more into some of the causes of PTSD, some of the symptoms of PTSD, and then we'll get on into some of the ways to cope with and deal with the pressures of PTSD. All right. So for today, I'll say bye bye.